right now. All right, Instagram, here we go. Okay, this is my Instagram hack because you can't stream. Okay, peace, fam. All right, this is guests. I don't know what made me think I could do 16 guests in one day, but this is 13 and 14 and two more to go. Been up since 10. First and foremost, thank you everybody that watches Disrupt the Chaos. It's been supportive. Thank you, Cooperation Jackson, for sponsoring our show. And one of my friends, which I don't really like to take this route, but was like, girl, you need to grow the show. I was like, girl, I need money. So there's an app. It's called Venmo and Cash App, because I want to keep the show going and I need a producer and social media and all of that. But look, we're in a time right now where it's massive amounts of information. We're in a time where Mark Zuckerberg just cut an entire department, the fact checking department. Okay. Things are serious. Like, I mean, 101 days right now is feeling like 100 years. And so this is why I wanted to do this programming on May Day. I want to bring to you the people that are my comrades and friends, new people that are doing some great work, film, just media in general. Because right now, we just found out that Donald Trump on June 14th is going to have a birthday celebration by bringing in military to march in DC.
What?
Yeah. So like if y'all see like dictatorships, what do you always see? Erasure of history happening. Teachers and professors attacked. I'm telling y'all, I thought I would get a job in academia, but apparently academia is crumbling right now. Just the blowback on folks who are calling what Palestine is, it's a genocide. We're now finding out that they're closing most Social Security offices. Most people on Social Security are elderly folks, rural. Most of the income for African American and Latino older people, 80% of their income comes from Social Security. They just gutted the National Institute of Health. They're trying to defund NPR and PBS. The Attorney General, Pabon, has said that if she finds who a whistleblower is, they're going to arrest the whistleblower and they're going to go after the journalist that took their information. She's saying we're going to seize the notebooks of that. A 2 and a 4-year-old were deported. Both of them getting treatment for cancer. And here we are. The flip side of all this, as I always say, we're not going anywhere. We know what's happening. This conversation about DEI is not about DEI, it's about Black and Brown people. And we have to now be very clear who our people are. But most importantly, as I am not an artist, I have so much admiration, and art takes on many forms. And right now, I have the extreme pleasure of introducing my homie, Shaka King. I think now we're almost 9 years into our relationship as friends. Shaka, obviously a great director, producer, co-writer of the 2-time Oscar-winning movie, Judas and the Black Messiah. And I think he's probably working on something right now. He keeps things to the vest, I understand. And how important I think that film has been. And right now, how instructive is that film? When we're particularly seeing the attack and people straight up getting snatched, and people losing everything. And después, Kristian Mercado, who I've known your work, I mean, Hooray for the Riffraff, the Palante video you did. I watch it every day. I cry. Beautiful. That stand-up special you just directed with Taylor Tomlinson.
Oh,
in the movie. And so I've known about you, and it was divine timing when I saw the fundraiser on Seed and Spark.
Yeah.
And I became an executive producer because when I had money, I was like, oh, hell, I need to be in this in
We appreciate it.
All the ways. No, I mean, this is going to change the trajectory of Puerto Rican filmmaking. I mean, all we have are what, 2 West Side Stories, and I like it like that.
Yeah, the history of Puerto Rican cinema is like very
yeah,
limited, for a lot of reasons.
You're bringing it. So let me start with Shaka. Shaka, filmmaker. How are you analyzing the times we're in for artists, but just in general, from like your politic and your perspective?
How am I analyzing it? I mean, I don't know if analyzing is the right word. You know, what can I say? I mean, I guess like my practice hasn't really changed at all. My artistic practice, I mean, hasn't really changed at all. You know, I think that the industry is changing rapidly. You know, obviously, I think honestly, before Trump was even elected, you know, whatever sort of presence of, you know, for lack of a better term, right? Everyone's sort of using DEI as a very blanket term now. So sure, like, let's call it that. You know, whatever sort of diversity initiatives had kind of come into popularity during the George Floyd rebellion in terms of within Hollywood. Prior to Donald Trump getting elected, you know, you saw a lot of those measures go away. You saw a lot of those, you know, heads of diversity that, you know, on the heels of the strike, like those were the kind of a lot of the first positions to be cut from studios. And then obviously Trump gets elected. You know, I always say, you know, president is the biggest celebrity in the world. President of the United States, the biggest celebrity in the world, and you know, really does move culture in a big way. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a mistake that you saw, you know, sort of this like resurgence of Black cinema in Hollywood, specifically during Barack's presidency. You know, like those, you know, your Ryan Coogler's, your Ava DuVernay's, your Barry Jenkins, your Jordan Peele's. You know, they saw the success that they had, that they did, you know, in terms of like their careers kind of taking off. I think that happened because, you know, there was a Black, besides the fact that they're obviously incredibly talented filmmakers and they made great work, you know, they got those opportunities that, you know, previously would have largely been denied them because there was a Black family in the White House and they were the you know, the most famous people in the world. Similarly, you know, you see Donald Trump get elected for a second time, and he's ushering in a culture that, you know, is significantly devaluing the work and contributions of non-white filmmakers within the industry. You know, and you know, the language that you're hearing isn't sort of blatantly racist. It's not like they're like, you know, we don't want Black films, so we don't want, you know, non-white films. You hear expressions like, you know, movies for red states, you know, you know, work that just doesn't appeal to like the coastal elites, and all of that is code for, you know, movies and television that cater to white people, you know, and I mean, I haven't heard some of these, you know, I'm not going to sort of get the unfiltered conversation, you know what I mean? But I have heard from people I know, like on one call, like an executive was like, yeah, we want shows like shows with like a white guy with a gun, you know, and I think we're very much kind of like entering, you know, the era of Reagan in many ways. Like if you look at movies during the 80s, they were very much, you know, you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, like white man slaves, bundle of brown people movies. It was a genre in and of itself, and I think I don't know what's coming, but it does feel like we're heading more so in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, and Kristian, I want you to speak to that too about specifically filmmaking and Hollywood. But look, every fascist government begins with erasing history. These people are trying to take out things out of the African American History Museum in the Smithsonian. You're like, the whole thing is Black people. Like, you want to take and I know there's growing attack on artists, and there's, and then you have a confluence of something like a Hollywood, which is so hyper capitalistic.
Yeah.
And, has, for the most part, never been able to tell our stories outside of two things, either criminality or like somebody saving that person, a white person saving that person in a Black movie, and then the hyper kind of male movies that Shaka was talking about in the 80s. So, Kristian, like, what is your perspective of what's happening in the industry?
Well, I think, like, in a larger part, I guess the culture is just shifting towards more conservative trends. You know what I'm saying? Like, in general, like, conservatism has been plaguing our society, and like America's, no matter what, as this like kind of like really like bipolarized system where it's like, oh, red and blue, right? Like, honestly, I don't even know if like America has a true liberal like thought, because there's even like Democrats are so like sort of centered, you know what I'm saying? And like everything keeps moving towards right and towards, Trump specifically, like it's very authoritarian, it's very fascist vibes, like it's given all that. And I feel like you're seeing all the systems that, are supposed to be in place, like kind of crumbling, right? Like a lot of what they're doing right now with the guy in El Salvador is just like almost legal fugazi. Like, oh, how can we make people legally disappear? Like, how can we figure out like the loopholes within the system or the cracks? And Republicans, I guess, are just getting so good at that, and it affects the culture. Like what Shaka was talking about, where like, yeah, like, I agree with him completely. I think DEI, whatever, I don't even know, that word just started popping up, but I feel like so much of Hollywood as an enterprise is based on like, oh, does it make money? Like that's kind of like what it is sometimes, like I really hate that that's kind of sometimes what it boils down to, where like the profitability, because it's like a hyper capitalist system, and so like you're trying to like make art within those confines, and sometimes people just look at it straight up as numbers, right? And so I think with this wave of conservatism, artists, intellectuals, they're always under attack in these kind of systems, I think, right now, especially currently. And so making things that like either matter or speak truth to power, they've never been popular. If you really think about it, they're always popular, not in the moment, but after the moment, what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like at the time, that person's usually like ostracized, outcasted, shunned from society. They become almost a pariah. Like if you speak truth to power generally, even like, let's say in the industry, let's say you want to like speak to like, ills or like specific systemic problems, you're going to be shunned somewhat. And so, but then I think in a way that also focuses your work on like things that mean something to you, and like you end up carving your own path, right? And so like, and then that becomes popular later on, because it's like, oh, people take notice of like, oh, this is actually what we want, or this is really what we feel, and there's something truthful about that. And I think for me, film has always been more like a lens to truth. You're always like seeking out truth through it, right? Like you're like, oh, what am I seeing in front of me, and what's truthful about it? And increasingly so, we're living in an age that increasingly values the lucidity of reality, and like kind of almost like, oh, like an age of like lies almost, what I'm saying? Like we're stuck in that, like people are like constantly questioning the truth, right? People can manufacture the truth more easily than ever. and also new technologies are emerging where, you know, we'll pretty soon have a hard time telling what visually even is true or false. You know, like it's going to be harder and harder as we navigate this world. And, you know, we do have like a system in place right now where the truth is constantly being attacked. So I do think cinema has an important place in that, because more than ever, you probably need it to like highlight or like to kind of sort of try to find its way into these truths. And like sometimes I feel like it's a mechanism for showing truth sometimes, you know?
Yeah. So for me, what I think of like DEI, like I really know that that's about Black and brown people. It's like when I went to college in the 90s and I'd have white people like, oh, you got here through affirmative action. And I was like, you got through here through affirmative action. Have you read your history? Like you keep a people back for 400 years and we're still the dopest. All you'll do is copy everything we do. But in the 90s, it was a blowback against multiculturalism, right? Which is, again, we want Black and we want all people represented. All folks of color need to be represented in history books. Why are they not? You systematically erase them. So for me, DEI is them just being like, we ain't gonna say it's Black and brown people, but y'all know what we mean. And it also becomes about devaluing the work and who we are. And also it's not a trend. What's happening in America is that anti-intellectualism is what's winning, not truth, not facts. So Shaka, can you talk about your road as a filmmaker, and then of course about Judas and the Black Messiah?
My road in terms of how I got.
Yeah, what made you want to start doing film?
Well, I my mom was a playwright. My dad produced her plays. And at the time, I didn't have, you know, when that was the case, I didn't have any interest in filmmaking, but I did work backstage, you know, during their productions. And I do think that there was, in hindsight, there was absolutely a major influence there. But I used to really be into writing short stories in high school. I wanted to be a fiction major in college, but they didn't have that major in college. And so I was taking political science courses, kind of just like wasting time, honestly. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And my best friend in college, my roommate, and to this day, my editor, Kristian, he was starting to take film production classes. This is our junior year, because he was a film major. And like the first 2 years, you just kind of take theory. In your third year, you start to take production. So he started taking production classes, and he really enjoyed it. And he was like, yo, you should, you know, I'd already fulfilled all my requirements for my major. You know, I could just take kind of any class I wanted. And so long story short, I started taking some film classes my junior year, and I fell in love with it. And, you know, did that for a couple years, graduated knowing I wanted to make movies, but not really knowing how I was going to get there. And I started I started writing screenplays at this creative arts center in Harlem called the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center. This is after I graduated from college, and I was writing screenplays. I bought a 60 millimeter Bolex. I started shooting music videos and shooting, just really like short music videos for friends who made music. And around that time, after I'd done my second music video and I'd written like 3 unproduced scripts, I just realized, you know, I need to kind of try to pursue this full time. At the time, I was working in education and making films, you know, whenever I could squeeze the time. And so I decided to go back to school when I was 27 years old. And I went to NYU for grad film. And that was where I really started making films, like, all the time. And, you know, did that for 4 years, or really 5 years. While I was there, I made my first feature, Newlyweds, took that to Sundance. Sold it at Sundance, if you could call that really selling it, because we only sold it for like $25,000. I came home.
What was the name of the movie? I'm sorry.
Newlyweds. Newlyweds.
Yeah. Newlyweds. Yeah.
Kind of like sold it there. Thought that my whole plan when I even went to grad school was like, get into grad school, make a movie at grad school, take it to Sundance, sell it at Sundance, trajectory. Your career will take off after that. That wasn't exactly the case. I took the movie to Sundance. We talk about sort of the climate for film now. The climate for film in 2013 wasn't much better, quite frankly. I remember when I took my first film to Sundance, I was trying to get a sales agent, which is an agent who will sell your movie once you get into a major festival. And, the moment that you get into a festival like Sundance, it's expected that your phone is going to start ringing off the hook and you're going to start getting all these calls from sales agents who want to represent you. And I got no calls. And then finally this one guy called me and he was like, listen, I love your movie, but I can't sell your movie. And I was like, why not? And he was like, well, he said, listen, he said, I want you to know. And I'll never forget because it was just such a crazy thing to say. He was like, I'm not white. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? He was like, what I'm gonna say next is gonna sound like, racist. He's like, he said, your movie has a bunch of black people in it and none of them are famous and no one's gonna buy it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's a crazy thing to say because it's Sundance. Right. Sundance launches careers. I was like, there are tons of movies that get bought at Sundance and feature actors who aren't famous. And he was like, listen, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what you can expect. And I said to him, I said, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I actually didn't. He proved me wrong. What he said kind of came to fruition. I took it to Sundance and could only get one buyer who didn't, who tanked it. I remember years later, I spoke to a friend of mine and who worked at Magnolia, and he was like, somebody who worked with them saw the movie after the fact. It was like, wow, this is a really good movie. Why didn't we take a look at this? And he was like, I told you should take a look at it, but you said that it was worthless, just looking at who was in the movie. So that was a very sort of roundabout answer as to how I got here. And I'm skipping many details, but long story short, I studied film when I was in grad school. And, I was 33 when I graduated. I didn't make Judas, which is kind of what probably people know me for, until I was 40 years old. So it was like a good 7-year journey between my first film and my second film. And in between that time, I was making, directing TV for hire, trying to get, films off the ground, just, hustling.
Yeah, no, you broke it down. I mean, because that part where you're like, it's Sundance. This is the films that they purport to want. And I don't know much around that, but I'm always like, when somebody says that, there's too many Black people in a movie, and you're like, we still here? This is still, and that it comes from, so how people will say all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And then it comes from a Black person, and you're like, but Kristian, your road to filmmaking, and what brought you to, when did you decide and why to do a movie on Pedro Albizu Campos? So folks that don't know, Pedro Albizu Campos is really he founded the nationalist movement in Puerto Rico. I think that when people talk about Puerto Rico, they don't know anything about us. And I know as I'm writing that part of it is also as we're born American citizens, we didn't have the choice, right? So when people talk about, quote, Latin America, South, we don't belong geopolitically in any of that because we're a colony. We're born as United States citizens. So I've always seen a tight relationship, specifically with African American and Puerto Ricans. Two people, U.S. citizenship, never treated as a citizen. But Pedro Albizu Campos was the nationalist leader. He went to Harvard. He joined the military. He planned operations
Victorian.
That were also I've been finding out that who was supplying some of the weapons to the Nationalist Party were people in Ireland. Like the Irish Republican Army was sending guns and stuff to the people in Puerto Rico. And he became so dangerous, he was arrested. Then his last stint in an Atlanta penitentiary, they actually put in a something that causes cancer and was burning his skin. He ends up unfortunately dying from those things. And I know Boricuas in general, still there's not a mass understanding of what Pedro did, and the fact that he did believe in armed revolution. I mean, the man even created the Nationalist Party own money at one point. So knowing this and knowing that a lot of our people still don't know his story and how he has continued to influence, particularly armed revolution, whether it was Los Machateros or the FALN, what made you be like, I need to make this movie about Pedro Albizu Campos?
Well, he's just an interesting figure in general, and like I feel like he speaks so much about like he's such a critical point in the Puerto Rican history. I've done a lot to like connect that story in a way, because I think like sometimes when I talk about being Puerto Rican to people, I feel like I'm talking in science fiction. If I'm honest, like I think people look at me and go, "That sounds crazy. That sounds insane." But Puerto Ricans are a highly targeted subgroup of like what's happening in America in general. Like there was a period of time where there was a gag law. We weren't allowed to like, fly on the flag, and it held a harsh penalty. And I think we haven't done enough.
Out on that point, Chris. I think you faded out. What Kristian just said is the gag law, which basically meant you could not fly the Puerto Rican flag. That's when I tell people, when people are like, why are you so proud of your flag? Because they didn't allow us to fly it. Like people were arrested for having the Puerto Rican flag.
Yeah, there's been so much to be done to silence Puerto Ricans historically, and like so much to do like to erase. Like people talk a lot about like currently like critical race theory and what that does to the education system. You don't have to look too far. You can just look at what happened to Puerto Ricans, where we systemically lost a lot of our own history just through education systems, because the education system wasn't something we controlled, and so they systematically erased a lot of things. And Pedro Albizu Campos is one of those little like kind of like weird like historical tidbits of Puerto Rican history that you might know it, but you might not know it. It's not formally taught sometimes. It's like kind of this weird like erased history, and it's done intentionally so. And I think Puerto Ricans, a lot of times, our identity and our history is through reclamation. Like and that's adding a step to it, like it's not by default, like it's not like given to you. It's like you have to go get it. And like you're adding like an extra step to it, which, isn't really how those things should work, honestly. Like it should just be something that's integrated into the fabric of your like existence or society. And so a lot of this project was, I think, just trying to be understood. I think what I kind of leaned into the most when I was working on it was like that feeling of being erased is something I can kind of sympathize with a lot, because I feel like anytime you're like in these systems that are way bigger than you could feel like really like a David versus Goliath all the time, where it's like, fuck, like there's this thing that's way bigger than me, and it's so oppressive, and they're like so powerful, and they're so willing to like exercise that power all the time. And it's like, fuck, like how do you navigate that, And I felt like looking at Pedro's story, he obviously did a lot, like more, than I could even say. I'm not sure if I'm even as like even like a pinky worth of bravery that man had, but he was so, like so strong, like powerful about his belief, like in the film, without spoiling too much because it's not out yet and it's still going to do its first festival circuit. But there's a person that like the government of like America institutions try to buy, and they were like, oh, we can just put you in power, and if you play ball and we'll give you money. And he like refused it straight up, and like that shows such a crazy like strength of morale and like ethics, and I think sometimes we forget how important those things are, because like we live in a society that doesn't value like ethics anymore. I think, like, what I mean, like when you put money in front of somebody, they bend. You know, people bend to power in America. That's just how it works now. And you know, I don't know if there was an era where it was cooler to be a rebel, like maybe the millennial or like the 90s or even like maybe even the 60s and 70s. There was these counterculture movements that people were like, well, fuck the system, we're gonna like. But now it's like sell out. Like that's the ethic. Like the ethic is like, yo, how can I make money? How can I procure a sponsorship? How can I be the biggest fan? I wonder sometimes what, like, there's so many things that erode a society, and I don't think you can point to one thing per se, right? But like that, I don't know if like we would have people that, you know, it's rare to see that type of person now. And I think I just wanted to be seen, I guess. Yeah, like I wanted to show a part of my history that I've had to explain so many times to people, and it is exhausting to have to explain yourself to people all the time. And so I felt like this film connects the dots really like in a succinct way where like I can just show it to anyone. They'll be like, oh, what the fuck? I totally understand what a Puerto Rican experience is to some degree now in a way I didn't see it before, you know?
I mean, it's going to be the first film that is not racist.
Yeah. Puerto Ricans have a deep, long sort of like we're integrated into the fabric of the American canon of cinema, but it's always like Knife Man #2 or like, you know, like a movie like Bad Boys with Sean Penn, you know, like,
or Fort Apache the Bronx, you know, like,
or like
growing up with that movie, growing up in the Bronx, seeing that movie, but also seeing the protests that were led by Richie Perez, and you read what he was saying in 1980. But fam, Dr. Redmond, Shana Redmond is on. Unmute your mic.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? That's what I'm trying to do for 1 year. Good to see you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but there's people talking around you.
Yeah, I'm in a public place. My apologies.
No, it's okay.
You know, if you're interested,
Kristian, finish your point, and then
if you're interested too, like even historically, like sort of like where Puerto Ricans sort of stand in like cinema. It's always been like we're always kind of like in a marginalized place for the most part, you know, and like it's very rare that we have often like real depictions of it, or like I think Spike Lee's probably the person who's been the best at representing Puerto Ricans on film, you know.
Absolutely.
He's been the one who's kind of like been like, oh, they're part of the canon of what's happening in the city, and like he gives visibility to us when most people don't. Like otherwise you have like Popeye O'Doyle, you know, beating up, being like, oh, these fucking Puerto Ricans are, you know, like there's always like a racist quip in like old movies, and you know that still sometimes happens. I think less sometimes now, but you know, like Shaka, you're like Sundance, right? Like back in the day, there used to be a director named Joseph Vasquez who was a Puerto Rican director. He went through the Sundance system, and like his movie premiered there, and it was it's called Hanging with the Homeboys. But this man has a really tragic story. He's like a Puerto Rican filmmaker back in like the 90s. He's like trying his best to kind of figure out this system, and you can almost like it's a very tragic story. You should like look into it, Rosa. I've always wanted to tell that story too.
What happened to him?
He kind of like, I think he just suffered from mental illness a lot. He almost got arrested during one of his premieres. Like it's just like a slew of random things that just, I think like the system just didn't really like him. Like something just didn't stick, you know? And then he had like a lot of like dark history. Like, you know, like his family also dealt with a lot of mental illness and stuff. But, you know, Hanging with the Homeboys is kind of like a classic, honestly. And like it also launched John Leguizamo's career, you know? And so, but he was one of the early like Puerto Rican directors who was like kind of like on that trajectory. A lot of people used to say he was going to be like the brown sort of Spike Lee, but it didn't pop off really. And then he tragically died of AIDS, you know. So like,
I need to watch that. So, peace, Dr. Redmond. You with us? Thank you so much.
I'm here.
Hey,
yes, of course. Good to see you.
Yeah, and you're at a conference, so thank you for taking time out. You know, I mean, in the work you do as a professor, associate, well, adult professor, I don't know the title, but adult professor at Columbia. Yeah, and who studies this and really studies music and artistry as a revolutionary, or should be revolutionary. Just wondering your thoughts as of now with all the anti-intellectualism and like the backlash of anything that's about us and our people, and every day we got to defend something, you know, about who we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the strategy, right? The strategy is to keep our heads on a swivel so that we never return to ourselves in any meaningful way. It's always about expenditure, you know, trying to demonstrate some kind of fitness for something, demonstrate an aptitude for something. And, you know, I think that's in part what's interesting to me about this moment where people, Black folks, brown folks, are saying, "Nah, we're in the street dancing because we have to live." Right? It's about withdrawing the kinds of expected responses to terror. It's about holding on to ourselves and each other as a way of mounting sustainability, which in and of itself is a protest, right? And this is very Audre Lordian, and we have to actually figure out how to preserve and maintain ourselves so that we can fight these battles that exist now and are going to come our way constantly for the foreseeable future. So I see the music, the creative arts, as that opportunity to bring us back to ourselves, to bring us back to conversation, to camaraderie, collaboration, and to be with each other in meaningful ways. I mean, there are so many things to be said about sinners, but just related to this is an opportunity for us to sit and think together, right? This film has been galvanizing in helping people to just be back in their bodies, back in their histories, and back in conversation with each other. And this is what the arts create and do, and they hate to see it. This is why they're trying to take over Namak. This is why they've taken over the Kennedy Center, right? They understand on some level, not a pure level, not a kind of fundamental level, but they understand on some level the power that is generated from these spaces and what it has the potential to do. It has the potential to animate, to mobilize. And so this is why we see these structures and institutions being bombarded and weaponized as well. So I think we have to lean into harm reduction, and we have to lean into survival. And we know that music and the arts are quite often our most kind of primary, most paramount survival strategies. And so I'm here for it. I'm with it. Instead of actually expending a whole lot of energy responding to every idiotic, bigoted thing that comes out of this administration and the media that supports him.
Yeah, I mean, and let me just say again, Dr. Redmond is the author of Anthem Social Movements and the Sound of Solidarity in the African Diaspora, and the award-winning Everything Man, the Form and Function of Moral Descent, and is a professor of English and Comparative Literature in the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Race at Columbia University. So yes, but before Sinners, I also will bring Shana back in the future to really break down, because you're a professor in Columbia, so you saw it all happening, like every day. I mean, just the nature and what they're doing to students, which eventually still affects, like how you're saying, how they're trying to take away anything that is about Black art, music, books, all that kind of stuff. But what I wanted to say, being part of Judas and the Black Messiah, is I know now how powerful. That's my feedback. Is that me? You have to hear that? Does it matter?
It's you.
Yeah, is that okay? Oh, I had something was going on. It sounds way better now. I know the power of it because when my dad watched it, he was like, Oh, so this is what you've been doing for 30 years? I was like, Dad, I've been a revolutionary for 30 years. This is a dope movie that I'm part of. But for him to see the flag, he said that's the first time in a movie that he ever saw our flag with respect. And you think of when you watch the movie, anybody who hasn't, but when you watch it, right? Obviously we see the young lords and we see Chacha Jimenez represented, right? But that was the first time any of us as Puerto Ricans have ever seen a movie of that level of revolution that also reopened the conversation about the Rainbow Coalition, but the relationship with the Young Lords Party and obviously the Black Panther Party. And for some people, they could be like, what can 4 minutes do? 4 minutes could do a lot when you've never been represented in a revolutionary way, not as a lot of Boricuas, they say we have an ay bendito mentality. Oh, America's so bad, we'll just do whatever. Oh, we shouldn't be loud. Oh, we deserve to suffer. And then you see that, and the journey of Judas and Black Messiah, but everything that's happening and has happened post that. I'm wondering what you all would say to someone who wants to either pursue filmmaking, pursue being an educator, a critic, an artist in your own right. Like, what would be the message right now? Because I do think that so many people in this country are consistently under stress every day. It gets worse. I think what you said, Shana, was that like, we can't keep consuming it. It breaks you. It mentally breaks you. But yeah, I'm curious. I'll start with Shaka. Like, what would you say to young people about what art is supposed to do? And also, it's not about a movie making $100 million per se every time, And I guess that would be the confluence of what we've seen with Sinners,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess
And then,
my response to folks who want to do it, I mean, I have students coming to me throughout my career. I've had students come to me and say, I want to be a poet. And I'm like, well, why are you pre-med? Why are you pre-law? And they have real material considerations that guide them on that path, right? That divert them from what they understand as their most fulfilling pathway. And my insistence is always, yes, we have to pay attention to material constraint. Yes, we have to pay attention to political repression. Yes, we have to pay attention to these things. But that can't stop the work of art. It can't stop the life of the heart and the mind, and because those things are urgently needed. This is something I'm saying to anyone who will listen right now, is that study is more critical and urgent to me now than ever in my career. And I've been doing this a while. And it's not because I need to put my head in the sand by burying myself in books and ideas. It's because these very ideas, the practice of writing, the consequence of struggle around ideas at this moment is paramount. We have to struggle over ideas, and the artists are so often the ones who are bringing those ideas to the table, right? All art is propaganda, as Du Bois said. And so we need our armies, excuse the militarized metaphor, we need our armies to be creating that art. We need our people creating those moments of contest, of challenge, of deep, intensive study, and modeling those things for us. We don't need the breads and circuses. We need hard work right now. And hard work can also be deeply pleasurable. Right. Deeply enjoyable. And all of those things have been so present for me in this work. And I want people to be reminded and sustained and heartened by those things. So my advice is, you want to do art, you want to be a creative, do that shit. Period. You figure out your community so that your needs are being met. But then you create the art so that your heart and your mind's needs are being met at the same time, because that is the work right now. That's urgent. We have to be in our creative bag, figuring out how to change people's minds, but not in a way that is defensive. It's actually just about showing how beautiful we actually are always. And this is the work for me of trying to explore and study and make as capacious as possible the opportunities for Black and Brown people.
Yeah, and I know that I think Shaka and Kristian might have a hard out at 5. So if y'all have to go, totally understand. I'll keep you on a little bit more, Shana, if that's all right. But Shaka, yeah, the same thing. Like, what's a piece of advice that you would give to someone who they're like, this is powerful, and has to like maneuver their way through some systems to get that out? But what would be your message to, especially again, younger folks who want to be creatives, who want to use art as resistance?
I mean, I honestly always just say basically the exact same thing that Shana said. I think ultimately, like in some ways, when artists ask me that question, I go, well, my advice doesn't really matter, because if you really want to do this, you'll find you don't have a choice. You just are compelled to do it.
Right.
I've definitely I've come to my own crossroads at different points in my career where, it got hard, and I thought there might not be a future in it monetarily. And I never considered walking away from it, but like I stopped for a moment, and just like didn't know what to do. And then an idea came my way, and I got excited about the prospect of making something, and I made the thing, and it was the most fulfilling experience of my life up, artistically up until that point. My career went in another direction after that. So I always just go like, if you really are an artist, you'll find you just don't have a choice but to make art.
I love that. It's kind of like, as someone who's an organizer, like I would often get questions that from students that they say to me, when do you take a break? How much do you get paid? And my whole thing is like, of course we take breaks, whatever that looks like, but this is a struggle for freedom. This is not a 9-to-5 job where you punch in and you clock out. It's in your body. And I actually believe like that, me as a mom, that, that is part of my daughter. It's not like a DNA cell. It's more like who I am, how she was birthed, and then how she grew up in the movement, because I was not born into the movement. But like what she said, like, again, it's not, we live in a capitalist society, but you got to feel it in your heart. You got to know that every day you might not be able to do something big, but hopefully every day you're doing something that advances the struggle for Black and Brown liberation, particularly in this country, and also to have an awareness of what is happening in the rest of the world. And I think films can also do that, especially at this time where now this whole country is isolated from the rest of the world because of what this administration keeps doing. So Kristian, what about you? Like, you're making this film, and you're making other projects. The same kind of question, what would you say to someone who asks the question, like, how do I do this, or where do I begin?
Where to begin? I mean, nowadays you could just, like, it sounds so cliche, you just grab a camera and start doing it. I think maybe realizing what you like is probably like a big one, right? Like just knowing like, I like this, and like leaning into what you like and kind of like doubling down on that, because sometimes it's all about just figuring out where your taste is, like what you're like leaning towards, and organically that just went like kind of hopefully points you into like, it's almost like a compass, the things you like and the things you're drawn to, and you just try to like slowly edge into that and like work towards that. And maybe something more, I think something more practical that probably applies to people now in this world is maybe like try to create like healthy like relationships with like your own system of validation. because this world is very like intense. And artists, I think, generally have intense relationships with with work and whether it's seen or not, and like I don't think you can be too caught up in like what that relationship is. It's like you got to just make the work and keep doing it and keep doing it, and that people find it, and see it, and that's its own like little miracle. But I think if you focus on the result, like that's not the way to do it. It's more like focus on making it so that it's like coming from a more honest place, hopefully. Is that my dog?
Right?
Yeah. You guys can hear my dog? Yeah.
No, sorry. Well, first, let me thank both of you, Shaka and Kristian. Look, homie, I think the Albizu Campos is going to be a sea change, and all the other films that are being made in Puerto Rico right now. I mean, let me
the movement
at the right time, because listen, post Hurricane Maria. And although there's tourists and crypto boys, we've kicked them out finally. The fervor for independence in Puerto Rico has not ever been this high. I mean, I would always say, I don't think Puerto Rico is going to be free in my lifetime. And now I'm like, oh, we halfway there. Like, I mean, the work that's going on the island, the creativity, the farming, all of it. And now the least tolerance of having like these white people think they could just come up on the island and act the fool. And like, no, you're dealing with you're not dealing with the I bendito mentality. You're dealing with like the way ahead of the Bad Bunny, like, yo, this is it. And as I close out with both of you, I do encourage people to watch Bad Bunny's I wouldn't even say a video, the story that he did to accompany the song, right? Because that is what's happening on the island. There are places now opening up and they're trying to charge $11 for Café Bustelo. That's $1.25. Like the rapid, although we're stopping a lot of the gentrification, but also, fam, in Puerto Rico, our beaches are public and they're trying to privatize them. Yeah. So there's so much like resistance happening, on the island. So your movie, I totally believe, is coming at the right time. I think what Bad Bunny has done to influence an entire generation, I mean, I don't even think he might understand that just by who he is, but what he has done, he has now given the history of Puerto Rico to those younger folks. And as Shana was saying, the revolution can be fun and it can be beautiful, and we should be dancing at the same time resistance, and resistance is beautiful. So Shaka King and Kristian Mercado, I really appreciate you both with being with me today. I really want folks to know that there are many ways we resist, but we also have to support our artists at this time as they're also under attack, right? So peace.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
For all your work too. And it was nice meeting you, Shaka, as well.
Great to meet you too, Kristian. Good to see you, Shana.
All right.
Good to see you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, hey sis, thank you for being able to do this. It worked out a very, very good timing. So, hey everybody, so that was Shaka King and Kristian Mercado. I meant to say, please follow him, but also follow the Instagram page of Mataron Pedro, they killed Pedro. You can see just the incredible work he's already done. Again, folks, you're listening to Rosa Clemente. Thank you for being with me on this May Day programming. The show is sponsored by Cooperation Jackson. They told me I couldn't do it, but I'm 14 guests in and 2 to go. I had 16 incredible, well, 3 right now, but I've been up since 10 in the best of ways. I wanted to bring to the table the people that inspire me, but also the people that challenge me, that make me think, that have the nuances, but also to let folks know that the people you often see out there who we're told are our leaders, no, our leaders are people that I had on today. So I'm super lucky to call all of them my movement family. Dr. Redmond, Columbia. I mean, first, everybody, y'all need to go and read. I'll tell you the best article about this whole situation, succinctly in incredible. It's called "The University is the Crisis on the Price of Columbia." So see, fam, everybody on the other way, whatever. Here. Oh yeah, see, y'all got to read it. It is one of the best articles, and then you're there and with the students. How do you even start? I mean, you saw it, everything go down.
Yeah.
We know the timeline, maybe not, but we know. Well, I think we know the timeline. How was that, and how is it still? But the intensity of last year and the attack, and unfortunately, Colombia capitulating for whatever crazy reason they thought they needed to. I don't know, but
Right.
anything share with us.
Yeah, I mean, last year was both deeply, profoundly inspiring, but also devastating and just horrific. The kinds of infrastructure that the university and the city was willing to wield in service of racial capitalism and empire. I mean, the fact that our students were dragged out into the street, were arrested, were taken from loved ones without process, were, you know, had guns fired in their presence, all because political speech, debate, discussion was being forestalled on this campus. I mean, this is the reality of the situation, that for the suppression of free thought and inquiry, we now have a permanent police presence on our campus, whether it be NYPD or private companies, subcontractors. We have armed guards on our campus now, thanks to the university's unwillingness to service its mission and to make inquiry and debate foundational elements of its function. It just is absolutely incapable, unwilling to facilitate people's most deepest, most personal inquiries, right? Because this is not just a question of intellectualism. And this is what the White House is constantly trying to drag people back to, which is that we have to teach both sides, right? This is the language that universities and colleges are trotting out right now, where this is not an intellectual debate. There are intellectual elements. Study is required to understand some of the nuances and relationships and histories of this situation, but this is about life and death for people.
Yep.
And that cannot be intellectualized so as to dismiss it. And this is what students and allies and faculty and staff were bringing to the table every single day of the encampment and subsequent to it, right? Students are still being arrested. Students are still facing internal disciplinary procedures that now the Trump administration is trying to oversee and administer. Students are still facing being disappeared, right? We've had multiple students who have been taken as political prisoners in this moment, and the university has just within the last week said their names in a public dispatch for the very first time. So these are the circumstances that our students now are facing and trying to find education in. They are trying to be free. People go to college and university to be free and free others. And this is not the infrastructure that universities are now providing. They actually are working against that.
Yeah, let me ask you this then. The brother, I'm sorry, his name is escaping me. Why? Mahmoud, right? The brother
Ahmed Khalil. Mm-hmm.
That's in or Louisiana.
Gina, Louisiana.
Right? The worst, they're saying the reason they took him there is because this is one of the worst if not the worst detention center in the country that's privately run. But you said there were other students that we're just not hearing about. It like no, but like 5, 6, what?
Yeah, so there are at least 2 who have been incarcerated, right? So one was recently released, Mahsen Mamdani, and Mahmoud Khalil is still in the Jina facility, right? And him being swiftly exported out of state and disappeared out of state, right? For purely political reasons, purely subjective political persuasion, right? And it's a moment of recognition for me about the kind of everlasting nature of these carceral apparatuses, because I remember Gina 6. I was in graduate school when the Gina 6 case happened.
Yep.
So all of these things are very clear and present for me in the ways in which Black and brown people continue to be eaten, subsumed by these carceral cycles and infrastructures that have not gone anywhere, right? We know reform is a myth, it's a lie, right? Abolition is the only way forward towards something like justice for us. And so to see this Gina facility come up under these circumstances is really striking to me. It's bringing me back to all of the protests around that moment, certainly bringing me back to 2020, all of these things, because the students who have been primarily targeted at Columbia and everywhere else are Black and brown, right? Whether they're Palestinian or not. These are the students who are facing the most disciplinary charges, who are facing expulsion, who are facing deportation, right? So I'm very clear about this, and most of the students are clear about this too. The university now, because we're in this kind of conjuncture moment of both rapid escalation around empire, the forgiveness and kind of common sense acceptance of genocide, alongside the collapse and vilification of DEI and critical race theory, as if those things are ever clear to the institution or clear kind of strategies for liberation. DEI was never about liberation. DEI was at its best.
You might as well just say Black and brown people. Like I'm like, we went through this in the 90s. They called it first affirmative action, right? Because no Black or brown person is smart enough to go to college on their own. And then multiculturalism. And then the response to that was Afrocentricity, which was critically important, that intervention. So like this DEI is like, just say what y'all mean. We know what you mean. You're talking about Black and brown people and anyone that supports, obviously, liberation for Palestine, but also you're a professor and there's other professors. And I'm sure y'all are not, I'm not saying I know you're not okay. I think that we also have to remember that we have professors like you on campus who every day are supporting or maybe being threatened to lose something or seeing the rest of your colleagues, because everything that went down, and the sister I had on earlier was talking about, like, even if you're watching stuff in Palestine, what's going on in Palestine, what's going on, in Palestine, what's going on and the continuing genocide, and also, fam, they've killed aid workers and journalists and like hidden bodies and all that. She was saying that even us here, if we follow the work of what's resisting and charging genocide and everything, that every day we're under post-traumatic stress as well. I didn't think about it. I kind of always think of post-traumatic stress as like you had an injury in the war or you were a victim of a violent crime. But she's like, no, and this is why Black people get sicker and die earlier. So you have many colleagues that are in this space too and beginning to maybe be like, is this where I want to stay and work?
I've been asking that question well before this moment, honestly. So this has just been the push in my back to force me to settle down and really sit with the person I am and want to be. I mean, I can do this work outside of the university. The university is simply a workplace. So my question in distilling it to that is it a workplace that is sustainable? I don't know that the university is sustainable. I think everything of the last year plus has exposed to me its fault lines, its weaknesses. All of the agendas that I've known are part and parcel of the structure itself have just been laid bare for so many. And so, yes, it's a real question for me about how long will I be doing this? But I do think to have a situation now, a workplace in which a dear colleague was forced into retirement for having drawn attention to what's happening in Palestine and supporting students. My colleague, Catherine Franke, in the law school, having close colleagues who are on the ICE list and who now we have set up, escort
Security.
services for them around campus to make sure they don't get snatched, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
how are we living in this space and still attempting to hold on to some kind of mission of education as a public good? Columbia has no claims to be servicing a public good. They have no claims to being a top tier intellectual or educational institution at this moment. They have so deeply failed Harlem over many decades. They have so deeply failed their students and their workers that at this point, Columbia has been made a laughing stock. And because of the pressure points that this administration was able to put onto the institution, is now the example for everyone else about what not to do. So I can't reconcile anymore being in but not of the institution. That language that I walked into this career with just doesn't hold water anymore. So either we're going to take back these spaces and develop a deep and penetrating commons, or we're going to abandon it because these kinds of institutions at this moment feel deeply irredeemable.
Do you think that's the case? Obviously we hear about the Harvards and the Cornells and Penn State, but the effect on the smaller colleges and universities, right? Like, we don't know. We know things are happening. Do you think this is where we're seeing a complete breakdown of the academy and not the breakdown of it? I mean, like, and hearing what you're saying, if it's gonna continue like this, how many of us will either pursue or stay in there for our own safety and mental health? But what do you see about like a smaller college, like, I don't know, like a Hampshire or where you went, McAllister or Amherst, that right now is under the bare lay that they have less than 1% of Black people now, Amherst College, and it's not like these little colleges, liberal arts were made first, but there were a lot of them have done really great work, but now they're private, and if they lose a government grant, or just that maybe young people are like, college isn't for us anymore. I don't know. But is that what we're seeing, like everything laid bare and it just all falling apart, falling down?
I think it's a penetrating illness in these institutions. I think some are doing far better than others. I think there's far more potential for organizing and governance in smaller institutions. I think there's something beautiful about a liberal arts experience. That was my undergraduate experience, as you mentioned, and I think it's tremendous. I also think there's something beautiful about a research institution, but the fact is that these institutions have shown no care, no capacity, no will to actually meet the demands of this moment, to be leaders in anything other than racial capitalism. And under those circumstances, it is a doomed enterprise. This is not the purpose of higher ed, to retrain the next class of conquerors. I understand that many in power understand that to be the role of these institutions. That is not the role of education for me. That is not the place of an open ideas-driven institution. That is not its purpose, to reproduce power. It's actually to question and disarticulate power. So under those circumstances, you have to ask yourself, how much capacity do you have to fight? And I think on a smaller scale, some of that may seem a little bit more clear at a smaller campus, or even in a concert of smaller campuses like the 5 colleges, right? Or I'm currently sitting on Bard's campus, and they were recently discussed in the New York Times as having set a very different model than the one that Columbia instituted, right? It's not a perfect institution, but where Columbia conceded and capitulated completely, Bard instead has taken a different educational model where they have been able to create stability by making education far more accessible and quite often free. That is not the practice of a Columbia University that is now quaking in response to the federal government, because their endowment now is under threat, right? Instead of actually relying on its mission, it's relying on its bank account for its stability. And that is a failed effort. Every single time, they've lost complete sight of what's important, of what's needed, of what their mission is, about what this institution is meant to accomplish in the long term. And so when you concede to power in that way, when you concede to cowardice and just kind of craven ambition, these institutions now are paying the consequences for it. And I think it's time. I think it's time that these institutions be held to account for how they have been wielding their authority and their power in the world. It's a chickens coming home to roost moment for a place like Columbia. And we'll see what the people's response is to it. We know power's response to this.
Right.
But I want to see people with different kinds of ethics, different kinds of commitments, take important and necessary stands, and we'll see if it survives this moment.
Yeah, and being from the Bronx, Westchester County, now in Albany, I've known a lot of people at Bard, and for folks who know, Bard is they call it Annandale on the Hudson. So if anybody's ever been to New York City, it'd be like an hour and 45 minutes, maybe 2, depending on, but it has always been cutting edge. And I've been and done speaking engagements at Bard, and my experience has always been incredibly wonderful. Like the thinking and the thought and the way students are, I don't want to say just passively thought, that's not, but when you meet a Bard College student, you're going to see the difference. That's what I'm saying. When you see the work that is happening, and they've never wavered for that, and that's becoming a space for professors and colleagues, I think it's critically important. And then, I just think people need to remember that there are hundreds and thousands of colleges and universities, and a lot of them might not survive, and then you look at you're not going to ever be poor, Columbia or Harvard. You got like $10 billion endowments, but like you said, it's not that. It's about the ideas. And now we're in a time of surveillance at that level, and they're afraid. They're afraid students are not going to stop. And they should be afraid, because students are not going to stop. Like, this is the moment for this generation, maybe, not a direct line, but what happened on college campuses in the 60s that forced ethnic studies and Black people, the anti-apartheid movement that finally broke, was because there were students their entire career, 4 or 5 years, were on those front lines, and even with Black Lives Matter and challenging universities, I think that some of these people, the boards or whatever, they might not say it, but they're not going to say it, but they like what Columbia has done. And
Absolutely.
they're trying to be copy Columbia.
Absolutely. There are donors right now at Columbia and elsewhere who are saying you haven't done enough, actually. And if you want these millions of dollars in philanthropic funds, or you want this endowment, You need to do more. Give them everything and more. And this is what we saw at Columbia was a preemptive capitulation. They did above and beyond actually what was asked of them. So this is the kind of absent, or it's not even absent leadership, it's cowardly leadership, right? Those two words typically don't go together, but this is cowardly leadership. This is leadership that is training you to be under someone else's thumb. Why would anyone send their child to an institution that has modeled that kind of training? It's
Absolutely.
absolutely mind-boggling to me that anyone would take that kind of institution seriously. And this, in spite of, as you say, a tremendous amount of brain power, right? Faculty on that campus who are just tremendous people as well as being tremendous thinkers. And these are the kinds of circumstances we find ourselves. Like you said, incredible surveillance over our syllabi, class discussion sections, what we write on our social media, all of these things being so deeply policed that it is well beyond anything that might be considered academic freedom, which to me is important, but is actually not the point. This is a war on critical thought. And
Yeah.
to the extent that people are not being trained how to critically think and engage in the world, that is precisely what power wants. They want more sheep, and
Mhm.
we are raging against that. And that's the danger, right? That's why they're stripping the curricula. This is why they are making it more difficult for people to go to college, even as it was already difficult for
Yeah.
people to go to college. This is why they won't relieve the debt burden, all of these things. So I think we have to take it as seriously as it truly is. It's not about Columbia. Columbia could fold tomorrow, and that would not be the issue. The issue is about the training. It's about people being able to think beyond what they're told. And this is what we do in our classrooms, and that's the fight.
Mm. Uh, I'm so glad I caught you. Thank you for having time because I know you're legit like right now working. And like I said, I feel like your article is just one of those like when the story is told. And really what I'm sure there's other professors that spoke. I'm not saying that. Maybe I haven't seen everything. But I do know in reading your article, it made me be like, okay, keep going, keep applying. You'll get in there eventually somewhere because I think we're all maybe people our age are re-examining what they want the rest of their life to look like, and that if obviously like you said, if you can't teach in a college or university, there's other ways that you can teach, and
Right.
I do deeply care about so many of my friends who fought so hard to get tenure, and now you have all these states wanting to strip that. Like
That's
people
right.
work a lot for that, and the work that we do is work. And also now we're dealing with a generation that has no time span. Like they can't focus for reasons that they've been grown up under all this technology, and then AI and the lack of students wanting to read. It's like what Lupe Fiasco says, they want dumb it down.
Right.
But it's just at a whole different level. And obviously the continuing genocide. So, fam, I told you, y'all need to watch two films, Encampments. That documentary covers Columbia and the struggle of students and professors. Macklemore executive produced it. It's out there limited. And I also encourage people again to watch No Other Land. No Other Land is the documentary that won the Oscar. And like 3 weeks ago, because obviously they don't give an F. The IDF arrested and beat badly, almost killed one of the brothers that was the director. And I have to say, when I watched it, but there's no United States distributor, so they have released it for 2 more weeks. All you do is No Other Land is $13.99. I watched it. I mean, I knew I was enraged, but there's a part in the movie that really made me be like, you know what? We are dealing with some real demonic forces. I mean, we didn't get a chance to talk about sinners, and I'm going to bring Dr. Redmond on her, because I need like sinners. There's a lot, and it's beautiful. This documentary, these people are so demonic that not only do they raise the people's houses in this one village and tear them down, the people are living in caves, like, oh shit, like they're living in caves. There's a scene where they bring a cement truck and pour the cement into the water well. And I was like, oh, y'all are, I'm like, demonic, vengeful, like, you sealed the water that's not even clean. Like I was like, oh, I get it now. I mean, I felt like I've never been there. So, but I was like, yeah, everybody needs to. And there's a reason that no distributor in the United States would pick it up. So thank you for sharing your article, your work. I love you. I respect you so much. You always really make me think deeply, and I'm glad to be your sister. And I think we're going to see each other pretty soon, finally.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Seeing Saul Williams.
Yes.
Good night. I love you,
Be
sister.
Saul. All right. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, everybody. All right. What's good? Oh, it's 5:30. My next guest. Thank you for everybody that's been watching, commenting, following. I appreciate you very much.